At one time, there was a television show called The Weakest Link, where the host was quite harsh on the losers, sending them off with the words, "You are the weakest link." In fact, in cybersecurity, we are all the weakest link, because it is the human who makes mistakes that are exploited by malicious actors. And that is why they are often referred to as engineers of human souls, and there is even such a term as social engineering, or it is specifically this method of attack that, in a way, allows criminals to often achieve their goals. There are various ways of social engineering. This includes quite an old-school story where we receive emails or other messages that contain either an attachment we need to open or a link we need to click on, such as. And furthermore, if we do this, our computer becomes infected with all the resulting consequences. This story is generally not in real time, but it is very, very popular. According to various sources, between 80 and 90% of all attacks begin with this type. Phishing. It doesn't matter whether the attacks are directed at organizations or at us. The second variant of social engineering is when someone simply calls us and offers to do something. For example, the support service of our internet service provider says that it wants to improve the quality of service and it wants to check the internet speed, and for this, we need to install some software on our computer. Or he says that especially for us, as part of our tariff, they offer to install antivirus for free. And by installing it, we are effectively putting our computers in the hands of fraudsters. The third scheme involves the real-time interception of various one-time codes and passwords that we receive when accessing certain services, especially if we have enabled two-step verification for accessing public services, internet bank, email, or other online services. Finally, the last scheme, which has become very popular recently, is direct voice contact, where someone pretends to be an employee of either a bank or some law enforcement agency, pressuring us to take certain actions. Transfer money to so-called secure reserve accounts, provide the codes that we receive in SMS messages, or perform other actions that may result in some form of harm to ourselves or possibly to our loved ones. If we look at a typical phishing message, we need to pay attention and always pay attention to a number of important signs which are very rarely abundant in such messages. It is uncommon for a phishing message to contain only one marker indicating that something is not right. Typically, to increase the effectiveness of their phishing attacks, there are many more markers. For example, we have a non-standard sender address. It is written that this is Apple. In reality, we see that the domain from which this message came has no relation to Apple at all. We see a message that we may lose our money if we do not take some action. Thus, the attackers try to prey on our fear of losing the money we have indeed earned through hard work, as usual. The fear of losing access to the services we use is palpable, as we understand that if, for example, our account with Google, Apple, or other services is blocked, our smartphones, tablets, and sometimes even laptops can become useless, as we won't be able to utilize their functionality. We are being coerced into taking some action to click on a link, supposedly to update our payment information. Finally, an additional link that should encourage a person to click, if not on one link, then on another link provided in the message. And finally, multiple reminders to do something, that is, prompting actions. Here we see what seems to be a simple message, but there are 6 markers indicating that something is not right. And usually, when we actively use various means of communication for a long enough time, we can visually pick out these key markers that indicate that we are likely facing a particular attack. However, it must be acknowledged that lately, fraudsters have also learned to operate unnoticed, They use artificial intelligence to study how we write and what we read, so that the messages we receive resemble what we are accustomed to seeing, leading us to overlook certain markers and think that the messages we receive are entirely legitimate. But, in truth, there are also tricks to identify this, which we will also discuss. What actually really makes us fall for the tricks of scammers? Despite the variety of methods that fraudsters use to attack us, there are only 6 reasons why we are so susceptible to their tricks. The first is fear, but overall, we all fear something. Losing something, losing someone. There are various fears. Each person has their own. And if a person has ever mentioned this somewhere, in social networks, in messengers, in interviews, or elsewhere, it can be discovered and exploited. Not to mention that each of us has typical fears common to most people, such as the loss of loved ones, loss of money, and so on. These are actively exploited by scammers. The second aspect is irritation. If we are being actively spammed, it is obvious that we will want to unsubscribe from that spam. A clever method that scammers actively use is to insert something malicious into the unsubscribe link. Alternatively, if it is a link in the form of an image, clicking on it will download some file or something malicious to the computer. Either we activate the launch of some script that has, for example, been embedded somewhere, or we simply visit a phishing site and end up either losing our data or having our computer infected if we haven't updated or patched it in time and it still has the relevant vulnerabilities. Curiosity. It is a trait inherent to humans at all times. We are all curious. And, accordingly, this can also be used. For example, if you had a New Year's party at your institute or work and you had a great time, maybe you even don't remember what you did in the evening, and suddenly you receive a message on social media from a friend saying, "Here's a link to YouTube. Check it out. You were on fire there." Well, obviously, we will have the desire to see if we will become yet another YouTube star. We click on the link, and, lo and behold, we see a message. We see a site that looks like YouTube, and a message telling us that we need to update our player to watch the video. We click Update, and we have unwittingly installed malware on our computer. It's a very basic trick, but it turns out that many people fall for it. At the time when the COVID-19 pandemic was raging across the world, various messages were also circulated about secret infection maps, secret figures hidden by the government regarding the number of infected, and so on. And curiosity made us click on those links, with all the negative consequences that followed for us. Greed. Yes, greed is also a human trait that is probably inherent in many. We really want to gain a lot without doing anything or putting in the necessary effort. Therefore, when we are offered free payouts or courses that are 10 times cheaper than a subscription, or 15 to 20 times cheaper than their official price, we fall for this bait, and then they can do anything with us. They can extract data from our payment instruments, gather our personal information, and force us to do something, which can result in losing access to our computer and various accounts on different services. And finally, the last motive that is often used by scammers, and which leads us to fall for their tricks, is the desire to help. We all want to help in one way or another. Sometimes it is easier for us to help in the virtual space than to do so in the physical world. What would you choose? To go to some hospice or to donate 1,000 rubles if you received such a message? Perhaps the latter, and there are probably more people like that. Therefore, this is also used quite actively. Various shelters and websites are created on the internet, supposedly collecting money. It is not uncommon for these sites to be fraudulent. They exploit our desire to help others, where attackers pay attention to common mistakes made by people when typing various texts, including, of course, internet addresses and website URLs, such as typos. In this case, They can create domains in advance and set up websites that are hosted on those domains. It discusses how we can be redirected or expect to reach a destination ourselves if we make a mistake when entering an address on the keyboard. After all, keyboards are not only wide, like the ones we see on the screen, but also narrow, such as the virtual keyboards on our smartphones. The keys there are indeed small, and it is obvious that if we have wide fingertip pads or long false nails, we might accidentally press the adjacent key. And it is precisely this accidental pressing of a neighboring key that can be easily predicted, which is why there are quite a number of websites on the internet that differ from legitimate ones by just 1 or 2 letters. For example, I think you know that there is a bank in Russia called Sber. And obviously, if you enter the word Sberbank, you will end up on the website of this credit organization. But if you type Sberbank or Sberbank, because M and N are 2 keys that are next to each other on the keyboard, you will not see a message saying that such a website does not exist. You will end up on quite real resources. In one case, this is the online casino Vulcan, which is banned in Russia, and where you will part with your money. In the second case, it is an online credit store where you can obtain a loan, but these will not be loans from Sberbank. In this way, attackers also lure us to phishing resources. But the phishing here is carried out through websites. Therefore, when we visit a particular page on the internet, we must be extremely careful and pay attention not only to what we see on the page itself, but also to the address of that page. And these 6 motives, in fact, account for nearly 99% of all phishing attacks that come to us through various channels in total. To conclude the story about phishing, note that messages from any authoritative figures, indeed including management, increase the likelihood that you will fall for the scammer's bait. In your personal life, such an authoritative figure could be your parent, a close person, a friend, or someone else you know, whom you trust and would react to their message without a second thought. In a corporate environment, such a person is usually a superior, and there are numerous examples of attacks that exploit this moment, specifically phishing attacks, even leading to changes in policy on the ground. In 2016, the computer of John Podesta, the head of Hillary Clinton's campaign, was hacked in exactly this way. He received a message. He reacted to it. It was a phishing message, after which the attackers were able to gain access to his computer, and then to Hillary Clinton's email server. All correspondence leaked onto the internet, and experts believe this allowed Donald Trump to sway some votes in his favor, thereby winning the 2016 US presidential election. Yes, it has influenced the fate of the world in various ways, but it is obvious that such influence existed. That is, indeed, a seemingly insignificant phishing attack, and affect the whole world, not just each of us. It is indeed also important to acknowledge that such phishing attacks from trusted individuals can be carried out not only via email but also through other channels, or even, for example, a very popular story right now is the generation of voice deepfakes, where you receive calls from someone who supposedly is your close ones or relatives asking you to transfer money, and you don't think twice about doing it, because you are speaking to the voice of a person you trust and know. Today, it is not a great challenge to falsify or synthesize a voice. There are a considerable number of programs available on the internet to solve this task. Well, accordingly, fraudsters are starting to take advantage of this. In the future, they will begin to actively use deepfake videos, which are currently mainly used for jokes and pranks, but will be applied for deception and fraud. Fortunately, such examples are still rare, but they are already known. Therefore, in the foreseeable future, within the next 1 to 2 years, this will become a much more widespread issue, and the critical thinking I mentioned will be needed in full measure. You will have to track and pay attention not only to what is written, not only to what is said, but also to who is saying it, how they are saying it, and so on. This means that your attention should be more focused, and you must clearly understand that you can be attacked through completely different channels and in various ways.